EKŞİODLU'da çalışıyorum. EKŞİODLU bu akşam bu organizasyonun sponsoru. Ben önce Barış'a ve Scrum tarafına teşekkür ediyorum. Çünkü Jeff'i buraya getirdikleri için. Jeff'in önümüzdeki 2 gün İstanbul'da bir eğitimi var. Eğitim var ama bize bu akşam bu ücretsiz etkinliği sağladıkları için Barış'a ve Jeff'e teşekkürler. Thank you Jeff for organizing this event tonight. Bunun yanında bu etkinliğin diğer sponsoru Scrum Alliance ve EKŞİODLU ve destekçileri PMICL, İKYD ve GDG İstanbul var. Ben de GDG İstanbul'un parçasıyım. Hepsine teşekkürler ve son olarak da hepinize teşekkürler geldiğiniz için. Umarım güzel bir akşam olur.
Çok kısaca bir giriş yapmak istiyorum. İsmim Barış Bal, Scrum Torpil'in kurucusuyum. Scrum Torpil'den kısaca bahsedeceğim. Bir de unuttuğu birkaç gruba teşekkür edeceğim. Etkinliğin düzenlenmesine katkı olan Ankara İdrak Grubu ve EKŞİODLU'na çok teşekkür ediyoruz. Burada. Kısaca Scrum Torpil'den bahsedeyim. Scrum Torpil Ankara'da kurulu bir organizasyon. Scrum, Agile ve Scrum üzerine bir bilgi ortamı, bilgi paylaşım ortamı yaratma amacımız var. Tamamen açık, herkese ücretsiz. Sizlerin de eğer isterseniz yazılarınızı paylaşabileceğiniz, tecrübelerinizi paylaşabileceğiniz bir organizasyon. Hatta şu an aramızda bir kişi var. Yakın zamanda Scrum Turkey yazıları yayınlanmaya başlayacak. İsmini açıklamıyorum. Yakın zamanda Scrum Turkey'e girip bakabilirsiniz. Önümüzdeki hafta yayınlıyor olacağız. Bunun haricinde Scrum Turkey'nin ikinci en büyük amacı da dünyadaki en ünlü Agile siteleri Türkiye'ye davet edip bu tarz organizasyonlar düzenlemek, eğitimler düzenlemek. Bu aslında bizim 3. organizasyonumuz. Diğer ikisini Ankara'da düzenlemiştik. Bu seferkini İstanbul'da yapalım dedik ve şu an en önemlisi bence. Belki buradan sonra bırakabiliriz bile belki. Yani bilmiyorum, en top olabilir. This is the top event, so I may give up organizing such events. Çok kısaca birkaç özel teşekkür etmek istiyorum. Başta Nilay'a benim sonsuz sorularıma hiçbir tepki vermeden cevap verdiği için bu organizasyonu yaparken. Scrum Turkey'nin ortak kurucularından kardeşim ve en yakın arkadaşım Alper'e teşekkür ediyorum. EKŞİODLU'nun patronlarına çok teşekkür ediyorum. Eğer onlar olmasaydı bu etkinliği düzenlemek için vakit ayıramazdım. Bu teşekkürleri yaptıktan sonra artık hani Jeff'e sahneye davet etme zamanı, çok fazla sizleri tutmayayım. Onu anlatmaya gerek yok aslında. Yani bu kısımları ben aslında İngilizce hazırlamıştım, onu da baştan söyleyeyim ama çok heyecanlıyım. İlk defa bu kadar heyecanlanıyorum, onu da söyleyeyim. Kendisi Agile Manifesto'nun hazırlayıcılarından, imza yazılarından, Scrum'un yaratıcısı, aynı zamanda bunu yıllardır bütün dünyada yayılmasını sağlayan kişi. Şimdi söz ona bırakacağım. Jeff, it's your turn.
Can you hear me okay with this mic? Yes. Thank you, Barish, for the introduction.
Yes, no, I get what you said.
I'm very happy to be here in Istanbul to talk about Scrum and about the future of Scrum. Scrum is not just software. How many of you are in the software business here? Almost everyone. How many of you are doing some kind of agile practice? Almost everyone. Okay, so we have some knowledge resident. This presentation started as a keynote at the Scrum Alliance session back in Las Vegas, and as a result of that, I've been asked to do it in many places around the world, and it's evolved since then. In the last 2 years, there's been a major development in the United States. The Congress passed a law requiring all Department of Defense IT projects be agile. And they require the Department of Defense to report to the Congress on their progress. As a result of that, in 2012, if you looked on our job site in the United States, there were 20,000 jobs open for Scrum people. A few months later, it went up to 400,000. It started going up within a year to 700,000 due to problems with the government. Last year, it went down a little bit, but right now in the United States, about 7% of new job openings require Scrum. So it's radically changing the work. And how many of you heard about the Obamacare website IT problem? Yeah. There's going to be a lot more Scrum in the U.S. government after that disaster. Now, it's interesting because Scrum is uniquely suited to people in general, but also to the United States in particular. Our Declaration of Independence said that all people are guaranteed certain rights. The right to life, the right to liberty, and the right to pursuit of happiness. And Scrum plays into those capabilities. If you look at the way work is today, some of these are global surveys. Most people in the workforce are unhappy with their jobs. Most people are looking for another job. And in fact, in surveys that ask people how well they like work compared to other things they do, the only thing that people like worse than work is being sick in bed. So workers are not happy, at least not in the United States. And as I said, some of these surveys are global. Now, one of the roots of where Scrum comes from that shows how we address this problem come from my work in microenterprise lending, particularly with an organization in North America that is modeled on the Grameen Bank in Bangladesh. The Grameen Bank got the Nobel Prize for helping poor people in Bangladesh. And the way they helped them, they took people who were starving, could not feed their children, mostly women, and they got them together in a small group, and then they talked about how each person could develop a business plan. And when everyone had a small business plan, they would loan each person in the group 25 euro. Then they would go out and execute their business plan. When they paid back their loan, they could get another 25 euro. So you have these stories where a woman who couldn't feed her children gets a loan of $25. She buys a sewing machine and starts making dresses and selling them in the town square. And in a few weeks, she has enough money to feed the children. Within a month, she has some extra money to buy the children clothes, because before she could feed them, they had no clothes. They couldn't go to school. Now, in the second month she's buying them clothes, she's sending the children to school. By the third month, she's saving up money so that within about 6 months, she's starting to build a new house. And the people on this team that are loaning the money, they meet regularly to talk about their plan and how they're progressing. And it works a lot better than the World Bank. Okay, what Professor Yunus noticed is that the World Bank would spend 500 million euro building a dam, and the people would still be starving around the dam. And so what he figured out is how to get right to the people and put a small amount of money into something that could actually turn them into people that were successful. Now, the Grameen Bank has evolved now a foundation that works not only in finance, but in agriculture, in education, in healthcare, and that foundation is run with Scrum. So one of our Scrum Masters from the Lean Enterprise Institute was over there this summer doing some Scrum training, and this was the team he was upgrading the training, and they took this picture saying, "Thank you, Jeff, because you took the idea from us 20 years ago, and now you've repackaged it in a way that makes it really great for us to implement in all our projects." And this group is in Uganda, which is the Center for Agriculture. And they have these great stories of a poor woman farmer who started working with the Green Bank, and they would come by, their teams, their Scrum teams would come by with mobile phones with applications built with Scrum, and they would look at her crops, and they could see that maybe a leaf was brown. They'd look at a picture on the phone, they could tell what was wrong with the plant, and then they would show what you needed to do to correct the problem. So she said, in the last 6 months, my yield on my crops has doubled. I have twice as much production. And she said, not only that, but the Green Bank people have the prices. And I realized that the person I was selling my crops to for 300 shillings a bushel was selling it in the major city for 1,000 shillings a bushel. So now I only sell for 600 shillings a bushel. So I have twice as much crop, and I have twice as much money for the crop, for each bit of crop. So now I have 4 times as much money. So Scrum gave me 4 times as much money in 6 months. Okay. So that's what Scrum is about, is doing things 4 times better. Now I have with me the Reverend Arlene Sutherland. As I was taking these ideas from the Green Bank back in 1993, I talked to the software team I was working with, and I said, you know, your projects are always late, and you always have too many bugs, too many defects, and management is always unhappy with you, and the customers are screaming. I said, how long has this been going on? And they all said, well, it's been going on as long as we've been working in software. And I said, well, do you want to live the rest of your life like this? And they said, no. And I said, well, I have an idea that I got from the Green Bank. What if we could have, in 6 months, have 4 times as much software, and it was better software, with 4 times fewer defects? That would certainly make the management happy and the customers happy. But I said, I think we can do it with less work than we're doing now. So you guys would have a better life. Instead of working nights and weekends, you can actually go home and be with your families. And they said, well, that would be certainly better than the way we're living now. And I said, well, do you want to try it? And they said, yes. So we started developing what became Scrum. At the same time, I was talking every night to Arlene at dinner, and she would tell me, she was a minister, pastor of a church, and she would tell me all these problems in the church. People not working together. They never have enough money. They're always fighting over the budget. They sounded to me like the poor people in Bangladesh. I said, well, Arlene, you know, I have this idea. I learned from the micro enterprise lending bank. Why don't you try it in the church? And so it took a few years, but eventually she actually decided to try it in churches and has done it in, 5 or 6 churches. And in the church, we put the whole organization on a release plan. Every quarter, they're going to have new features. So we decided, what are the new features going to be for the church this quarter? We put them at the top of the backlog. We put it all on the wall on sticky notes, and everybody in the church can see it, and they can argue about it. And the minister is the product owner of the church. And the goal is to get twice as much done in the next 6 months for half the budget. I say to the people in the church, if you could do that with Scrum and you didn't implement Scrum, that would be a religious problem, wouldn't it?
They didn't always buy that.
Now, Ken Schwaber and I, Ken helped me roll out Scrum to the world. We're watching what she was doing in the church, and we said, wow, you know, you can not only do Scrum for a team, you can actually do it for a whole organization. So both of us started to be asked asked by venture companies, venture capital investors, to come in and help them invest in their companies. And so now I work with an organization called Open View Venture Partners, and we have over $500 million invested in dozens of companies, all doing Scrum. And the investment group uses it everywhere inside the investment group for everything. The finance group has a Scrum, the investors have a Scrum, the administration people have a Scrum, everybody. Because they saw that the whole company could do twice as much for half the cost. So this idea that we got in the church, we extended Scrum to the companies by seeing how the churches work. After the venture group had been working in Scrum for a number of months, they had 7 or 8 teams doing 1-week sprints. So after 3 months, they had 12 sprints of 7 teams. They had almost 100 sprints. And they analyzed all their data. They're very good at gathering data, and the investors like to look at the data. And what they found was the people that were working long hours, the investors only hired people that would work 50 to 60 hours a week. They were slow. They were not implementing Scrum well. They looked like waterfall. The teams that were really fast were working less than 40-hour weeks, and they were delivering twice as much. So the managing partner, the investment firm, said, we're going to go back to normal work week, no more nights, no more weekends, and every team will double production. And one team didn't, the finance and admin team didn't, and he said to them, you clearly don't know how to do Scrum. We're going to split you up and put you on the fast teams. Because everybody's going to get at least twice as much done. And actually, by the time he was done, within a year, all teams were running at 300% of where they started from. So that's what we like to see in a company-wide implementation of Scrum. So one of the ways to think about Scrum is that it gives, particularly for the software developers who tend to be overworked, it gives them back a life. It gives them back time with their families. It's a better way of working. A good team is a lot more fun. It's a lot easier to get the work done. The work is much better. The customers are much happier. So, getting back a life is part of the U.S. Declaration of Independence. The second piece of it is the pursuit of happiness, or I should say the second piece is liberty. Scrum also liberates the developers to decide what work they're going to do, how they're going to do it, and work together as a team to figure it out. So that someone is not telling them what to do all the time. In Scrum, we have the product owner. My company, Scrum Inc., runs with Scrum. The product owners have to come up with a backlog. They have to prioritize that backlog, but they're not allowed to tell the team what to do. And they try to all the time, right? And so this last week, I said, the product owners are messing with the teams. I'm going to step in as Scrum's master, and we're going to straighten this out. And the Scrum teams are going to figure out how they're going to do whatever they're doing, and the product owners are going to stop telling them what to do. They get to provide the list of priorities. That's it. That liberates the teams to actually figure out how to do their own work. The third component of the Declaration of Independence is the pursuit of happiness. Now, it's really interesting that there's a pattern called the happiness metric. Have any of you seen that pattern or tried to use it in your Agile teams? In Cherokee, nobody looks that happy, so what you really need, you really need that happiness metric. And so at the end of every sprint, at Scrum Inc., we ask people how happy they are and what would make them happier next sprint. And then we prioritize all that and figure out what is the one thing that's going to make the team most happy. And then we put that in the backlog, and that is a top priority item to implement for the next next sprint. It turns out that when teams are happier, their production goes up. And so does the revenue. It's one of the best forward indicators of revenue. So we've done a lot of research on happiness. At Harvard University, the leading course for some time was on happiness. They had over 1,200 people in every class. And the professor wrote a book called Happier, Professor Ben Shahar. In the book, he had this quadrant. He said, you know, there's 4 kinds of people. There's the hedonists. They're the people in the software, they're the hackers. We're going to hack away today and have fun, but tomorrow can take care of itself. Okay? So these people are going to be happy today, and they're going to be really unhappy tomorrow. Then you have the nihilists, and every software team has a nihilist. There are people who say, you know, this company really sucks. It sucked yesterday, it sucks today, and no matter what you do, this new Scrum Master, it will suck tomorrow. So you have these problems on the team. Then you have this third category of people, they're usually the project leaders. How many project leaders do we have in here? The project leaders always want to work hard and get promoted, okay? So they're going to be really unhappy today, working so hard, looking forward to be happy tomorrow when they get promoted. But what happens? They get promoted and they have even bigger headaches. So then they have to work even harder to be even more unhappy, hoping that they'll get another promotion that will make them happy. But it never ends. So what the happiness metric does is it asks all of these people, what will make you happy tomorrow? Because the quadrant you need to be in is one where you're happy today and you're going to be even happier tomorrow. So it starts to move the whole team around this quadrant into where they need to be. So we use it all across our company. So life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It's a unique fit for the United States, but it also seems to work in every culture. Scrum is in. You can go to Timbuktu, you can go to Nepal, wherever you go, you will find a Scrum team there. So it's spreading everywhere. I want to spend a few minutes talking about Agile. I just came from a conference, and a big topic of the conference was, what is Agile? What is the definition of Agile? And we found out a lot of people don't know what Agile is. At least in the software world, it comes out of the Agile Manifesto. And the Agile Manifesto was actually written by these 8 people in this picture. There were 17 people at the meeting, but 9 of them were on breaks. We've been meeting for a day and a half. We took a break. And during the break, Martin Fowler went to the board, and he started putting some notes on the board. He said, you know, we've been arguing and debating for a day and a half. We haven't agreed on anything. Is there anything we can agree on before we end this workshop? And within a few minutes, we wrote up on the board, well, one thing we agree on is that it's the people on the teams and the way they work together that make great teams. And processes and tools, they might help, but they usually slow things down. So individuals and interactions drive great performance. And we had a huge amount of data from Bell Labs supporting that. 10 years of data on hundreds, thousands of projects. So that's the most important thing that we came up with. And we talked for a couple more minutes, and the next thing we came up with, we said, you know, the next most important thing is that great teams deliver working software regularly in short intervals. That means at the end of a sprint, it's always less than a month. The software is done, it's tested, the bugs are fixed, an end user can try it out and tell you if they like it or not. That's the second most important thing in software development. This is what killed the Obamacare website. They never delivered anything working in years of development, $400 or $500 million, nothing worked. Okay, so clearly this is a really important issue. And you'll see later we have now big companies with thousands of people that can deliver a new release of their software every sprint. We have companies that can do it hundreds of times every 2-week sprint. Release a new version of the software live. So people are really getting this. The third thing we agreed on was getting the customer involved in the process was critical to getting software that they liked. And the fourth thing was most requirements change during development. So traditional software project management does not like change. And that's one of the reasons that customers don't like their software. Not only that, they don't use most of the features they live. On the average, worldwide, 65% of features are never used. So what we want is a process that can actually embrace change. We like change. The more change, the better. Because the customer's telling us what's really important to them, and then we want to give them that. And we want to do it in a 2-week sprint. That's what makes things really great in software development. So most of those values came out of Scrum and XP. The founders of Scrum and XP were at the meeting. Most of the other people were consultants and authors of books, thought leaders. So the Agile Manifesto was really an agreement mainly between the Scrum and XP people, along with a number of thought leaders in the software community. So here we come today. That Agile Manifesto was written in 2001. Here we come today, 12 years later, almost 13 years later. And what we find is, if you take the data from the Spanish group with hundreds of thousands of projects, you find that traditional projects have a 14% success rate. And Agile projects have 42% success, 3 times as successful, which is really good. The waterfall projects have a 29% complete failure rate. You never works. The Obamacare website almost wound up here, but now they're spending many more, probably hundreds of millions, to move it into the yellow. And over in the Agile projects, only 9%. So we cut 2/3 of the failures. But these yellow are projects that are late and over budget with unhappy customers. And look, in the Agile world, we have 49% of projects late, over budget, unhappy customers. There's a lot of bad Agile out there. That's our biggest problem. So what are we going to do about that? That's my major concern right now. Agile development is dominating the world. It's pretty much game over in the United States. But what about all this bad Agile? In Scrum, a good product owner will always ship early. If a product owner has a project with a budget, a good product owner knows that 20% of the features are going to have 80% of the value. So the product owner will want to ship here. That's always early. And then they'll get feedback from the customer, and the customer will say, well, you know, we have all these new features we want, you know. Some of this stuff that didn't add much value is not as important to us now. We have new stuff. And so a good product owner will get on another value curve. And maybe ship with another 20%. Maybe even by the time they're done, get on 3 or 4 value curves. So at the end of the day, they deliver twice the value to a customer. And they're on time and on budget. Every step of the way. That's the Agile strategy. And the problem is the bad Agile teams are not doing that. They're not delivering on that. Okay? So they're saying they're Agile, but they're not Agile. let's go back. I want to spend some time talking about the beginnings of Scrum, because Scrum is a disruptive technology. It was designed to be 10 times as productive as traditional development, and we benchmarked it using the tooling of the leading productivity expert in the United States. And only when it was 10 times as fast did we release it. And when we released it, we guaranteed that anybody that used it would double production in the first month of use. We were selling some tools that went along with it, and we offered them money back on the tools if they didn't double production. This has come around now, so we have major defense contractors now. I understand that they have a lot of CMMI in Turkey. How many are using CMMI in your companies here? Not so many in this group.
There are some companies in here.
Yeah.
Yeah. CMMI level 5.
Right. So there is one CMI level 5 company in the world that is totally Scrum. It's not that they can't do waterfall, they can do a virtually perfect waterfall. But what they found is that at CMI level 5, the Scrum projects only cost half as much. So they offer every customer 2 bids, 10 million euro for the waterfall and 5 million euro for the Scrum. The only difference, they're both CMI 5, the only difference is that the Scrum project has 40% fewer bugs, plus or minus 3% guaranteed. And surprise, the customers all want Scrum. So this company was a partner of Lockheed Martin in the United States. The company is systematic in Denmark. They're a partner of Lockheed Martin in the United States. And so Lockheed Martin started offering the government half-price defense projects with Scrum. So this last year, the other defense contractors who are losing contracts to Lockheed are coming by and saying, Jeff, we have to bid Scrum or we can't get a single contract. We have to bid 100% Scrum. You have to train us all really fast, or we're going to go out of business. So Scrum is disrupting the whole defense industry. See, you have to make it 10 times as fast to get the defense people to go twice as fast. That was the thinking in the beginning. If you're operating and competing against Google, Amazon, Facebook, guess what? Twice as fast is not good enough. Spotify is using Scrum. Recently, their CEO has said, we've got to go twice as fast. They're already going 5 times as fast as everybody else. They're going to go 10 times as fast. How are we going to do it? Well, they have a bunch of expert coaches that are figuring it out. Well, how do we get that 10x? Well, I talked about micro-enterprise development. We learned a lot about team process. The formalization of Scrum, though, comes out of Japanese manufacturing. So we took the definition of Scrum from Professors Takeuchi and Naka, and then we added into it everything we knew about software, because we were using it primarily in software at the beginning. I also have a lot of experience and background in robotics. So in the year before I was implementing Scrum, I actually had a company just right on the MIT campus in Cambridge, and a robotics company came by, 5 graduate students from the MIT AI lab came by, and they said, can you rent us some space? We're starting up a company called iRobot. And I said, fine. We have some extra space, we'll make a little rent. So they were building these multi-legged robots. And about every other day, one of the robots would escape from the lab and run into my office trying to hunt me down. They had infrared heat-seeking sensors. And so on Fridays, Professor Brooks would come by, senior professor at MIT. I said, hey, Professor Brooks, explain to me how this robot works. It's really interesting. And he says, well, you know, at MIT we tried to build a smart system for 30 years. We built the biggest computer we could build. We build the biggest database we create. And what do we get? We got a smart chess program. It's been a total and complete failure. So I decided to do something radically different. This system has no central processor. It has a processor in each leg that can move the leg. It has a processor in the spine that can coordinate legs. It has a neural network chip in the head that figures out what to do. The chip is blank before you turn the robot on. It has no database, only sensors. The world is the database. So he says, let me show you how this works, he says. And he puts the neural network chip in the head, and he flipped the switch on the bottom of the robot. And all of a sudden, the legs start to flap like a spaghetti, and it wobbles to its feet. And then it starts walking around. It looks just like a baby learning how to walk. In fact, we took it to the church, and the group was astounded. All the women said, "Oh, it's so cute."
Oh, some of the men said it too.
They saw a robot learn to walk for the first time. So I said to Professor Brooks, I said, "Wow," I said, "that's really interesting. And you have these kind of simple rules that the robot kind of follows, and it figures out what to do." I said, "I wonder if that would work. You know, I have all these software development teams. I used to run these big banking projects with hundreds of COBOL programs. Do they still have any COBOL programs in Turkey? Anybody here? Whoa. I'm in Zurich all the time. They still have thousands of COBOL programs. I said, you know, they're always late, they're always behind. What if we kind of got them together every day and use their brains like the neural network and the robot? Maybe we could have them boot up into a super intelligent team going really fast. Do you think that would work?" And he said, "I don't know, why don't you try it out?" And I did. It's called Scrum. And here's Professor Brooks, Robbie Brooks now with his latest company, Rethink Robotics. He's built a robot now that will work on the team. So there's a lot of deep thinking behind Scrum. Another deep thought came from the inventor of Smalltalk, because the first Scrum team was using Smalltalk. And Alan Kay's team at Xerox PARC, Alan Kay came to MIT to give a presentation on how he invented Smalltalk, and this was his first slide. He said, "You know, at Xerox PARC, my team invented the personal workstation. This was the thing that Steve Jobs looked at and created Apple from. And Bill Gates came by and looked at our Windows and ripped us off and made Windows out of it." He said, "We also took the mouse. The mouse was created at Stanford Research Institute, but this was the first use of the mouse. It was on our workstation. We built the first laser printer, and we invented the internet and Smalltalk, the first widely deployed object-oriented language." And when he got done with that slide, I thought, I was depressed. There was nothing else to invent. Alan and his team invented all of it. Right? The only thing that's not on there is the inkjet printer, which was invented at the same time by a friend of ours in Palo Alto. And probably brought over to the Xerox lab to be used. But I was really listening to Alan on the next slide because he said, "Here's how we invented this." He said, "We only looked at really extreme data points. Most companies, they try to make small improvements. He said, we would never have invented any of this, trying to make small improvements. To make radical steps, you have to look at radical data."
Can you hear me if I don't use the mic? So we looked at the most radical software data that and we examined hundreds of research papers. And the best paper in the literature we found was a paper by Professor Nanaka and his partner Takeuchi.
Published in the Harvard Business Review, which was really a surprise to us to find the best paper was in the Harvard Business Review, not in a software journal. And in that paper, they described a way of working that they saw at places like Honda, Toyota, 3M in the United States, almost all manufacturing plants. And they described 3 types of project management they saw. As consultants, they were both worked at business schools. They would bring management to visit the United States. They would visit places like NASA. They told them how they built the rockets at NASA. Many years of requirements, many years of analysis, many years of design, many years of implementation, many years of testing. Big documents all passed along to different departments. And at the end, it blows up in the pan.
Some of them blew up in the air.
Yeah. So how do they build rockets today? We've been trying to get into Elon Musk's rocket company, SpaceX, because they have the contract for NASA. The space shuttle was shut down. Tesla, not Tesla, but SpaceX has the contract, multi-billion-dollar contract. We have been into their competitor. We know that there are Scrum Masters at SpaceX. In their competitor, all you see everywhere is Scrum boards. How long did it take? Instead of 10 years, 3 years, it worked the first time perfectly. And the second time. I don't know if they're on the third time yet. So today, and even NASA is moving to Scrum from many of their projects. This is over. What Takeuchi and Nanaka saw at companies that really worked, Fuji Xerox actually tried to implement the NASA style. They found that the failure rate was 86%. They did a root cause analysis. They found it was big documents passed off between siloed departments. So they created a process where everything was face-to-face, no more big documents. People working together. They called it sashimi kind of style. Teams working together. But the best teams they saw at Honda, later at Toyota, everybody working together, cross-functional teams, all at once, short iterations. And Takeuchi and Nanaka said, these type B and C remind us of the game of rugby, and particularly the Scrum formation in rugby. And we're going to call this Scrum Project Management. When we read that, we said, hey, that is a really good way to formalize our understanding of Scrum. We're going to call it Scrum. The team decided they would have a Scrum Master. And in the paper, they said the characteristics of the teams, the high-performing teams, were they had transcendent goals. They were trying to make the world a better place, like the Toyota Prius team was giving the mandate. Toyota wants to green the planet. They want to have automobiles make air cleaner. You could really use that at Istanbul. Their first step was to build a car that got twice the gas mileage, the Prius. They got a team together, they said, that's what we want to do, and we wanted to deliver it in half the time we've ever delivered a car. And the team said, well, we couldn't do that with anything we've ever done at Toyota. They said, well, do something different. Figure it out. So those teams were autonomous. They decided what work to do. They decided how to do it, when to do it. They were responding to this challenging, transcendent goal. And they were cross-fertilization. At Toyota, every member of every team can do every job that any other member of the team can do. Okay, so this life, liberty, and a high-performing team makes people really happy. Many people on the first Scrum team said they were going to be looking to find a team like that for the rest of their life. So Scrum comes out of lean product development. That's what Takeuchi and Naka were looking at. In fact, they even wrote a book on Toyota, Extreme Toyota. And I read their book, and I couldn't find the word lean in it. They never talk about lean. It's not a Japanese concept. We were invited over to the Lean Enterprise Institute. These are the guys that invented lean. They invented it by looking at Toyota. They wrote a book on the machine that changed the world, about Toyota. And in there they describe what I believe is the first documented Scrum team. Taiichi Ohno came back from looking at Ford and General Motors, and he said, we can't have these specialists on the assembly line. It's too much waste. So we need to have cross-functional teams all working together, everybody to be able to help each other out. And they need to be doing continuous improvement, deliver things in short iterations and constantly improving their process. That's where Scrum comes from. So the Lean Enterprise Institute invited us across the street to visit their headquarters. And I said, hey, how come Takeuchi and Naka, they never talk about lean? But you guys always talk about lean. In fact, one of the books that started lean was called Lean Thinking. Why is that? And they drew this on the board. They said, well, it's a yin and a yang. Takeuchi and Naka are talking about new product development primarily. And that's done by Scrum teams that are lean. Over on the assembly line, lean is the assembly line techniques. They're implemented by Scrum teams. If you go on the assembly line, you'll see these cells. They'll have Scrum boards. You talk about Scrum boards. And they're implementing all these lean techniques. So yeah, we're looking at the same thing, except we're more focused on the assembly line rather than new product development. That's one reason we have a lot of bad agile out there, because the bad agile is not lean. It's not cross-functional, it's not delivering on short cycles, it's not continuously improving. The CEO of the Lean Enterprise Institute brought this book in. This is the book on lean product development. And we looked at that, and it described Scrum in it. The lean product development team has a product owner. They call him an entrepreneurial system designer. It has a cross-functional team. It does do separation current engineering, which is, most software teams don't do that. But it's measured by cadence, which in software is the sprint. It's a pull system. The teams pull into the sprint. And they measure flow, which in Scrum we do by measuring velocity. So he's actually asked us to write a chapter, the next edition of the book, on Scrum, actually, and we did, but it's Scrum applied to cars. Because we have people building cars with Scrum. So Scrum has this plan, do, check, act cycle. PDCA cycle, that's what Edward Deming taught the Japanese, that's what they implemented Toyota, PDCA. The way Toyota thinks about it is planning means to avoid worry or unreasonableness, like unreasonable dates. Because they just upset people and make them go slower. So a good manager would not do that. Do means to avoid work or control inconsistencies. Smoothing out the flow of work is important for performance. If you put pressure and cause spikes in work, slow down. Check means to avoid muda or find wasted outcomes. And Toyota holds the management accountable for implementing this. Their job is to avoid unreasonableness, avoid inconsistencies in flow, and eliminating waste from the system. So well-implemented Scrums, you'll see people using this. This is Taiichi Ohno's taxonomy of waste. And Microsoft implemented Scrum for all the development tools, 3,000 people. They're now going to 20,000 more people, but these 3,000 are doing a really good Scrum. They went from 12 to 18-month release cycles down to 3-week release cycles. Every 3 weeks, you have a new version of Visual Studio, the build system, test system, project management system, the whole toolkit for development, every 3 weeks. And they did it by removing waste. The biggest waste in software is in process inventory, just like in manufacturing. Stories that are not finished at the end of the sprint, not tested and not done. So Scrum is driven by this idea of getting things done, and it's really important to make sure what people are doing is in a ready state, it's prioritized to get it done. And we know how to use that system now. This is mainly for reference. You go back to the papers that show every team can become a high-productive team, over 400% improvement, without exception. And we have multiple ways to do that. The problem is we haven't had an easy way to do it until this past year. And we've gotten a fairly easy way to do it by looking at patterns. Scrum has a basic definition that's in the Scrum Guide, the roles, the artifacts, the meetings or the ceremonies, but they need to be wrapped with some patterns of execution, because it's like there are the rules of football, which are the rules of Scrum, but we actually get out in the field, those teams that perform great have standard ways of working together. And these are the patterns. So the last 4 or 5 years I've been working on patterns that support Scrum. We just last week presented the paper on that at an IEEE conference. And it starts with the first pattern that the investors discovered. They discovered after examining some years of data on hundreds and hundreds of sprints that teams that finish sprints early accelerate faster. And that was a big surprise to investors. They said, wow, the teams have to finish early. That means we don't want to encourage them to take too much, because if they don't finish on time, they get demoralized. They don't have time to think. They don't improve. They don't get better. And even a slow team who's getting better, they'll run right by a fast team that's flatlined. So we said, wow, that is the key to every Scrum team. They need to finish the sprint early. What is it that prevents them from finishing a sprint early? Well, one thing we already found out, if you don't have stable teams, you're changing the teams all around all the time. Nothing works. So we need to have stable teams. Then the next most important thing is teams take too much into a sprint, and they can't do it. Their appetite is bigger than their stomach. So you have a simple pattern to avoid that. Then they don't fix the bugs in the sprint. They don't test and fix the bugs. That creates in-process inventory. That can slow down teams in Silicon Valley by 24x. It's amazing the waste that causes. Then how do they get things done? Well, they need to work together. They need to swarm on stories. Virtually all teams are interrupted during a sprint. How do you deal with interrupts? You have a pattern for that. How do you deal with emergencies? Sometimes teams have emergencies. And how do you ensure continuous improvement? You have two paths for that. Just to give you an idea, take the swarming pattern, getting people focused and working together and focused on one thing as much as possible. If you have people on multiple projects on the same team, how many people have people on your teams working on multiple projects at the same time? Usually it's everybody. If you have people working on 2 projects, you will lose 20% of production. 3 projects, 40% of production. 4 projects, 60% of production. If managers understood the data, they would stop doing that. But for some reason, managers worldwide seem to be totally ignorant of 60 years of data on software development. that show this. Let's look at interrupts. I went into one team, one of our venture companies, and they had failed to successfully complete a sprint for 18 two-week sprints in a row. 9 months, never got half of what they planned on. I said, boy, management must be unhappy with you. They said, yeah, they think we suck. So I said, well, how come you're always late? They said, we're always being interrupted. The salespeople come in with new features. There's bugs in the field, we have to fix them. A product owner comes in with a new requirement. And I said, well, here's a pattern that will fix that immediately. Let's look at your backlog. What percent of the time are you going to have to deal with interrupts? Think over the last several sprints. And they said, oh, about 20%, something like that. So we said, okay, put a buffer in your backlog and keep that buffer empty. Use yesterday's weather, the average of what you've been able to complete in previous sprints, coming in. Now put the product owner in front of anything coming in to interrupt. And the product owner needs to triage. Some things will be low priority. Some things can be done later, the next sprint. Some things need to be done immediately. Put that in the buffer. So if you do that, 80% of the problem goes away. The last 20% goes away by implementing this rule. If the buffer overflows, the sprint's aborted, you replan, and you tell management that dates will slip. In the next 18 sprints, not a single sprint was aborted. They immediately delivered on plan, and then they tripled their velocity. So they tripled their production and never had any aborts. Because these patterns are what we call generative patterns. Because of this rule, it causes everybody in the company to try to prevent the team from aborting. And that helps the team go really fast. So these patterns are really powerful. I would never implement a Scrum today without that pattern. Here's another one I would always use. I was taught this by a lean expert in one of the biggest French companies. He said, Jeff, if they don't scrum the Scrum, they'll never get better. I said, what do you mean by scrumming the Scrum? He said, they need to use Scrum to make Scrum better. Well, how will they do that? They need to put the Kaizen in the backlog. Well, what's the Kaizen? The Kaizen is the process improvement they find in the retrospective. Put it in the backlog for the next sprint, and that is top priority. Put acceptance tests on it. So everybody's focused on the Kaizen. So that's the pattern of Scrum. In the Scrum, we tried that at Scrum Inc. I went back to Scrum Inc. We tried that. Here's almost 3 years of data. We started implementing Scrum in the Scrum here. Velocity was running about 40. Down here was around 20. Now it's up. We've popped over 300 on occasion. We're trying to get it up over 300 and keep it there. Okay, so these patterns are extremely powerful for generating hyper-productive teams. So the fact that Scrum is a disruptive technology, the fact that it makes life better for developers, it gives them freedom and autonomy to do their work in the best way they can figure out, and it makes for a happier team and a happier company. This has all moved to a tipping point in the United States. Okay? And as I mentioned, there were 20,000 Scrum jobs in 2012. Today I looked, there's 400,000. It was up, headed to 700,000, but then the government did some cutbacks. But it's remaining consistently about 7% of the total open jobs in the United States. And it will grow. The lead analysts in the United States have said, waterfall is over. Abandon it, get rid of it. If you don't, you will get outsourced or shut down. The business is fed up, just like the government is fed up with Obamacare. The Department of Defense, the law says they must be agile, The Department of Defense has written the Agile Manifesto into their regulations. So, in order to move really fast, we find that Scrum not only changes the way it works, but it changes the way we think about organizations. It tends to break down command and control structures, and this, I think, is your biggest challenge in Turkey. It's a command and control structure from what you're told. But what we see in the United States is changes in leadership. This is a cartoon on leadership. Amazon has a hierarchical structure, but they're all strong teams on there. Some way they get along with that. Google, really crazy structure at Google. Facebook, network. Nobody's in charge except maybe their CEO. Microsoft has these Scrum groups that are always fighting. Microsoft has always been a very competitive structure. Apple, everybody reported to Steve Jobs. I'm not sure it works the same way. Oracle, most of the organization are lawyers. Lawyers over here. All these organizations are changing because of Scrum. So we see one of the best models is actually at Spotify. Not because they're Spotify, but because they have over a dozen of the best Agile coaches in the world. The CEO of Spotify said, we're not just going to have Scrum Masters. We're going to go out and hire the best coaches we can find, and they will fill that role. We're going to have professionals. And so as a result, they implemented scaling of Scrum very well. They have squads, which are Scrum teams. They have chapters, which are cross-cutting teams. The traditional managers are more the chapter leaders, like the quality control manager would make sure that the quality was consistent across the squads. A lead architect would make sure the architecture was consistent across. And they have these tribes grouped, or these squads grouped into tribes, and then tribes have different major pieces of functionality. And so they have no traditional management. They have people that would be managers, but they're there supporting the implementation. They're supporting the teams. And if you go and look at Microsoft, you'll see their way of managing has altered as well because of Scrum. And SAP, a few years ago, they spent billions of euro on a new product they couldn't sell. And they said, we could say we have a management problem, but we think it's a product problem. And the thing is, we don't have people managing the product. So they took 2/3 of the managers and they made them product owners. No more line responsibility. Not a single developer reports to them. The remaining third of the managers, they said, we need some people that can worry about hiring, training, motivating, career pathing. And so we'll give each one of those managers 100 people so they can't possibly micromanage them. So basically SAP has removed normal management structure and put it into Scrum. We're even seeing companies like, well, here's just to show, Microsoft started at 18 months release cycles. Their first Scrum release was down much shorter. The interesting thing here is that their defects went down 90%. They had 30,000 bugs. Here they had only 3,000 bugs. 1 bug per developer. Is there anybody here that has only 1 bug per developer in your bug tracking system? That's the right number, and if Microsoft can do it, you can do it. You have to implement Scrum. Now they deploy every 3 weeks. New release. But we have some really interesting companies. The most fascinating companies today are companies that have no management at all. If you go to work at Val, your job is to come up with a great idea, try to convince other people to work with you, and ship it. That's it, there is no managers. We've interviewed these guys for a new book we have coming out, and they told us they did have a big problem last year. About 17 of the new people were starting to tell people what to do. And they had no managers to fire them, violating company policy. So some of the old timers had to get together and fire these guys. And they said that was a failure in their process. And so this year, they're going to come up with a solution so that can never happen again. Now, Valve is a multi-billion-dollar gaming company that's hugely successful. They're more profitable per employee than Google or Apple. And we have other multi-billion-dollar companies that are doing the same kind of thing. So things are changing radically. The leading edge of Scrum right now, some of you I know in here know about Edge of Scrum in the Netherlands. They have students. These are teenagers, 13 to 17 years old. The bell rings, they come running into class. The teams immediately put these Scrum boards up on the wall. They have their daily meeting. They sit down and they go to work. The teacher says nothing. It's amazing. And the energy level in that room is huge. And I asked them, I said, do you get your work done faster with a Scrum? And they said, oh, yes. He said, we finished the semester weeks earlier than the other classes that I'm doing Scrum. I said, is the quality of your work better? They said, oh, yeah. Our grades are 10 to 20% higher than the classes that don't do Scrum. I said, is it more fun doing Scrum? They said, yes. For every story, we have the definition of fun. Not only the definition of done, but we have a definition of fun. And the story must meet the definition of fun. So, we see Scrum now moving into education. We've already talked about agriculture and economy. We're starting to see it move in the government, the parliament in the UK has had training on Scrum. Obviously, the Congress of the United States knows what Agile is. They've written a law mandating it.
They have a long ways to go.
So, huge changes going on. And everybody in the world really wants a better life. Everybody wants more freedom to be themselves, to be all that they can be. And they want not only the ability to pursue happiness, but they want to actually achieve happiness. And Scrum gives them a way of working where they can bootstrap into a much better capability for themselves and their family. So right now I heard there's only one Scrum master job in Turkey open on the internet. Is that right? Somebody told me that tonight.
Yes.
Only one. What's the population of Turkey? How many people? 75 million. So the U.S. is what? Around 300 million now? But let's divide, the U.S. has 400,000. Divide that by 3, it's about 120, 130,000. So now you have one, you need to work to get to 130,000. If you do that, we'll be more competitive. It's a global economy thing. In the U.S., we're bringing work back from India. It doesn't matter how cheap they're on anymore. It matters how fast. And unless the Indian team does Scrum today,
Some of them do.
they can't compete. There are very good Indian Scrum teams, and they will get business. But the waterfall teams, they're going to lose. So now it's time to finish up and have questions. Do we have time? How are we doing on time? 5 minutes? Yeah.
Well,
When I was in Germany, nobody had any questions. I said, well, you must have questions. I said, wow, we were so blown away by the impact. Like, we were really thinking about that. But yeah, back here first and we'll go.
My name is Mark. My question is, how will you persuade the customer to get into this process?
How do you convince the customers?
Is it convince or appreciate?
Convince them.
Convince, yes, that's the challenge for new agile project. Systematic did the best I've seen. They just offered them a choice. Half price project or full price. To get half price, you have to work with Scrum. Again, here's the things you have to do. It's really your choice. Now, most smaller agile companies don't have as easy a job as that. They don't have that level of experience. But there are companies in here that have started implementing Scrum. Like Maurice, your company sounds like it's doing a pretty good job of selling Scrum into your customer base. You know, what did you do to your customers to get them interested and excited about Scrum? Maybe you don't want to answer that now, but he spends time today talking to me about that. It's not hard. What I recommend is the first thing you can do with your customers at very low risk is you can say, with Scrum, you get all your changes for free. You remember in your last project, you had change that cost you more money, right? And you went over budget. We'll give you all your changes for free. There's no customer that doesn't want change for free. But then you say, well, to get change for free, you have to throw away those low priority stories if you put any new stories in, that's all. But then the changes are for free. So all the Agile consultancies that I'm working with in Europe now are offering change for free. It's really easy. The contracts are really easy for that. The hard part is giving them money for nothing. And this is the way, money for nothing and change for free.
There's a song about that.
There's a song about that. To give them money for nothing, you say to the customer, you can terminate this project at any time. As soon as you feel like you have enough, you can stop. And we'll be working on the highest priority things all the time, and as soon as it gets down where the next story is not worth that much to you, we should stop the project. Then you'll have money left over in the budget, and 20 or 30%, depending on your contract, will go to the consultancy, and the other 70 or 80% goes back to the customers. So both the customer and the vendor get money for nothing. To do that, you have to be very good at executing. You have to get good backlog, good product ownership. Your teams have to be good at estimating. So I don't recommend that unless you're an experienced fixed price contract vendor. If you're already doing it, you know what the issues are on fixed price contracts. And you can consider money for nothing. A big consultancy, thousands of people, decided that this was going to be their lead strategic initiative. They did dinners. I helped them with CIO dinners in Europe and the United States. We found that a third of the CIOs wanted to go money for nothing right away, because they had hired hundreds of contractors from Accenture, Capgemini, and they were all really slow, and they put junior people on it. They paid them high rates. They needed more people, and the CIOs were tired of that. So they what they wanted to do is work with an agile vendor, maybe do a short pilot, establish an agreed on estimation practice, establish an agreed upon velocity, and then pay for velocity. No more hours, pay for velocity. Philips is doing that globally now with hundreds of thousands of people. Maybe one more, yeah.
Actually, I have LNK.
Allocate?
I think he also invented Dynamo, which is similar to iPad.
Yeah, I think so, yeah. The dialogue, it was kind of really prototype of
Steve
the
Jobs.
Yeah.
Steal it.
It all comes with allocating.
Aspiration, yes. This is corrupt country. It's just the news crap. but this is the reality. So, emphasize the importance of the dedicated and Scrum Master,
Yeah.
full-time Scrum Master.
One of the challenges of the Scrum Master, and it occurs in every country, is the Scrum Master's job is to make the work visible. You know, there's a Scrum board, everybody in the company can see exactly what's going on, exactly what's happening, and if you implement the interrupt pattern, everybody sees, oh, this manager just blew up a team, and it delayed the release. So, some managers don't want to be caught, okay? And some managers, they want to grab everything to build their little empire. That occurs everywhere. But the Scrum Master doesn't have to politically convince everybody, just has to show them the data. So what happens with good Scrum Masters? They keep showing the data. They keep talking to the management. They keep, in Scrum, you create a list of impediments. You prioritize the impediments. So the Scrum Master's impediment list, what I've said is if you can get, if you have many teams, if you can get 100 people on teams to all agree on what the top impediment is, if a manager doesn't fix that in the United States, they will be fired. So Scrum has been very good at building out bottom up, raising the problem, clarifying the problems, prioritizing the problems, and showing the impact of fixing the problems to the point where the senior management starts to get the picture. And they start demanding, and middle management is really the problem. They start demanding that the middle management cooperate and help rather than block the improvement of the process. But this problem occurs everywhere. Scrum is it has a viral kind of thing to it. Get it started, people are having fun, they're liking what they're doing, they're delivering better stuff. What we've seen is as Scrum approaches about 30% of the company, the senior management becomes aware enough that 2/3 of the company now is almost always late and behind, costing a lot of money, and 1/3 of the company is really working. And then they say, we're going to go totally Scrum. But to get to that 30% requires a lot of hard work by really good Scrum Masters, step by step. So remember, the market, if Scrum makes your product cost half as much, and the quality of the product is twice as much, then all those command and control companies in Turkey, they're going to go out of business. That's the secret of Scrum. It puts the bad guys out of business. That's certainly what's going on in the United States. There was a question up front before we go to the back.
No problem.
You want to let her go, or did you want to ask your question?
No, I'm not asking.
Okay, at first. Okay. Yeah.
Hi, Jeff. My name is Pınar.
Could you stand up?
Oh, sure. I have too much in my lap, that's why. So
Okay.
I would otherwise, sorry. I attended one of your courses back in Poland in
Yeah.
2008, so you haven't changed a bit. I've been actually executing multinational projects since then, so it's been quite a year for me, and I find that Scrum very effectively being used everywhere. Even in Turkey, now we have the co-owner of one of the technology companies here in Turkey, and now companies are asking for us, can we use Scrum? Are you a Scrum Master? Because it's on our website already. So it's being spread out. But what I find very challenging is the fact that people are not being adapted to Scrum very easily because it's new. And as Turkish people, we are not really open to new ideas or discussions because we are a little close-minded. So my question is, how do you deal with minimalist maybe people within a relatively smaller Scrum team, 3 or 4? I mean, I'll give you an example. If you're in the middle of the sprint and you have to finish it, of course, you have no other choice, you don't want to abort it. And maybe one of the person within the team is not working or not producing. What do you do? Or how do you deal with it?
Good question. Arlene, you want to answer that one? Let's let the minister answer that question.
What it makes me think of is a story that Jeff has told quite a lot
which is that, the Scrum Master mentioned that there were 2 people on the team who were not pulling their weight. And the advice was, don't do anything.
Okay.
And within a very short period of time, the peer pressure from the rest of the team strongly impacted one of them. And he started really coming around. And the other person had to be asked to leave the company.
Okay, might work. I'll try. That's the only thing I haven't tried yet. So yeah, I'll give it a try.
And I think that most of us hesitate and do not like to fire people.
I don't mind firing people because if it benefits the rest of the team. But I actually struggle and try to change that person and maybe give some of my really valuable time to that person
Right.
to convince him or her. But maybe doing nothing works better.
It often does, and it takes less time, it takes less energy, and it also is a favor to the person you fire, which is hard to.
Yeah.
Now, how many people in this room have been fired?
Oh, they will not say, of course.
Well, I would say you're not working hard enough.
Yeah.
So, it's
Most
not,
Scrum Masters get fired once or twice because they cause a lot of trouble. They're raising all those problems and money doesn't get fixed.
but if you are fired well, you learn. So, who else is going to tell them the problems?
Some of the things I've implemented in companies is I always say, any team can throw anybody off the team. And I'm usually the CTO or head engineer, so they always have to send them to me. And then we have these really interesting conversations like, wow, the team threw you off the team, what happened? But Scrum is like sports, and how good is the Turkish soccer team? What do you guys do this year? Not so good this year. But if you look at what happens on a soccer team if you have a guy that's not passing the ball, he's not putting out on the field, what do? You put him on the bench, right? The coach talks to them, you talk to them, you say, things are not working, they still are not improving, you put them on the bench, you're just going to sit out this game, you're not going to play.
You buy the referee.
What's that?
You buy the referee for the match.
You buy the referee, huh?
And then you try to put them back in the game. If they're still not doing it, then you trade them out. So, since Scrum is based on rugby, some of those same ideas that are common in sports work well. So this idea of the teams can just throw them off. They can't fire anyone, but the team, if the person is actually, often a person can slow down. They're not only not doing their work, they're slowing down everybody else. Teams should throw that person off the team. Well, what do? Well, they have to go talk to their manager. That's a management problem. Right? We tell me when we finish, Barish, but the questions keep coming.
That's fine. You can go.
Okay, question, the rear of the room, go back.
Each and every company that I taught say that we always customize the Scrum for our way. What do you think about the customization of the Scrum?
Well, Scrum is a very simple framework that's designed to be adapted into a company. But what you want to do is, it's like a superclass. A lot of superclasses are abstract classes. To instantiate them, you have to put, give it methods and data attributes and so forth. It's the same in Scrum. What you don't want to do is change the superclass. So like people say, oh, we don't need a retrospective. And then that means they flatline forever. Oh, we don't need the daily meeting, which often causes the same problem. In my last company, which had one of the highest powered Scrums I've ever seen, as I started to do Scrum training outside of the company, I told the CEO they were having problems with the daily meetings for multiple teams. I said, if you don't fix this, This is going to self-destruct in 1 year, I predicted. And exactly 1 year later, it did. They gave it the daily meeting. It's going to break everything. So there's certain pieces that you take out. It's like object-oriented software. Okay. Oh, we're building object-oriented systems. I remember the object technology days in the 80s when we were introducing that. You'd go in and you'd say, all you've got is C code here. There's no inheritance. They said, well, it compiles in the C++ compiler. Therefore, it must be object-oriented. But then the result is you get the same code. It's brittle, it's hard to maintain, it's hard to change, it takes forever. So there's about 8 key pieces of Scrum that if you pull them out, it will break things. Everything else you can customize away. You can add almost anything like data attributes to the class. Yes.
Hello, my name is Omar. What is your, what do you prefer for agile transformation of big corporations? For example, 10,000 plus employees, etc. Especially in a sector where regulations are very strict. I'm in a bank in Turkey, and I'm trying to train and coach Scrum teams. Yeah. And the most biggest impediments are the corporate impediments. Right. As we know, Scrum has employed now agility patterns. There are some metrics. When do you suggest to employ those metrics, for example, after piloting 5 to 10 projects, etc., or transforming to a unit to complete agility in itself, and then spread this agility culture to the corporation? And do you prefer or do you suggest this one, or do you suggest the big bang methods? For example, from top CEO level, we are going to do Scrum, and we are going to try to adopt agility, all the agility practices.
Most of the implementations I've seen are gradual implementations. They'll do a pilot project, then expand that to multiple teams, and then scale it up. I have seen some very big and successful big bang projects, but I don't recommend that unless the management really understands Scrum and they're willing to deal. You know, I remember in Germany, they asked me, one of the big telecoms, what a big bang. They said, what's the difference between big bang? I said, well, big bang is like NASCAR races. You know NASCAR races? People drive around the track as fast as they can, and boom, they hit the wall, they blow up, there's fire everywhere. People get killed. That's the NASCAR. Then they have these BMW touring races in Germany. Now, everybody drives around the company in a BMW. Almost nobody ever has an accident, but it takes a longer time, and it's not as much fun.
Keep your bias away.
If you're going to run a NASCAR race, your management team needs to be ready for things blowing up, catching on fire, and they have to be ready to deal with that. And most management teams, they're not that knowledgeable, they're not that committed, so I wouldn't recommend it. But some are. A very successful implementation we did a couple of years ago was at Pegasystem, which is a publicly traded system, large enterprise system. They had a 1-team pilot, and they brought us in, they wanted to do a transformation. We recommend they go to 6 teams. We put everyone through the training. The management, all the engineers, the training that we're going to do here is tomorrow the next day. And then they started 6 teams. But the CEO was a Steve Jobs kind of person, and he had told everybody, we're taking the company totally Scrum. He said, you know, we've got Google on our left, we've got Yahoo on our right, we've got Microsoft across the street, they're all Scrum. We won't be able to hire anybody if we don't do Scrum. Second, we need to double the speed at least double the speed that we deliver our software, or we're not going to be competitive. The only way we're going to do it is Scrum. So he told everybody they were going. Within 2 months, every team in the company started implementing Scrum spontaneously. So it's like a spontaneous big bang. Because they would, you know, it's like if Steve Jobs says, this is what we've got to do, everybody, right, does it right away, right? I mean, some companies are like that, but most companies are not. Your bank probably doesn't have that kind of person. So gradual growing and building the demonstrated metrics, as you scale up, you show, okay, this team delivered twice as much, it's twice as good. You want to do more of that. The thing that was really important in Pegasus, which would be really important in a bank, and also the telecoms, is we call them transition teams, but it's not a good word. A team that's responsible for the actual implementation. And what they do is they run a Scrum that identifies all the impediments in the company, prioritizes them, and then their job is to remove them in priority order. So you have Scrum trainers on that team, you have middle management on that team, you have senior management representation, so that they have the power to actually change the corporate policies. So that would be a strong recommendation for a bank, to really have that team that's going to manage.
We also find that we do workshops for leadership teams and help them to understand both what they're going to get and what they need to hold the Scrum teams accountable for. And that there are metrics that they can use, and they will be able to see the changes. And we encourage them to think of themselves as leaders rather than managers. I think one of the slides had that language on it, because every company needs people who are in leadership, who have a vision and want to move forward. Few companies need people who are saying, you do this, and you do that, and you do the other thing. So, but they need to understand what it is. And Scrum, as originally proposed, didn't talk about the role of management. And we are increasingly doing that and find that it matters a great deal.